You're listening to the Colts Blue Zone Podcast with Mike Chappell and Dave Griffiths.
Inside the Fox 59 CBS 4 podcast studio, welcome to the Colts Blue Zone Podcast. Alongside Mike Chappell and Matt Adams, I'm Dave Griffiths. Appreciate you being here. After the Super Bowl matchup is set, we will have the Chiefs and the 49ers Sunday, February 11th. If you're in central Indiana, that'll be broadcast on CBS 4. Some very good championship games from both the AFC and the NFC. Thrilling throughout, dramatic throughout, controversial perhaps in terms of some decisions that were made. It was beautiful fodder for armchair quarterbacks and Monday morning quarterbacks, very much like us. And I mean, I tweeted at the time that I still thought like you can be. We're referring to the Lions and the 49ers, of course, right now. How the Lions took a 17-point lead, and Dan Campbell stayed with his foot pressed firmly down on the gas pedal, trying his darndest to keep scoring touchdowns and failing on a couple fourth downs. Those failures allowed the 49ers to get back in this game as they kept scoring. The Lions really stumbled, and the 49ers are in the Super Bowl as just about everybody thought they would be at the start of the season. You know, it's funny how things come down to the two teams that most people, most experts would have picked at the start of the year, but it was certainly not for the lack of drama. So before we really get into our Colts coverage for this week, we'll talk a little Pro Bowl as three more Colts are going to be in the Pro Bowl games. Can't just call it the Pro Bowl. They're the Pro Bowl games now. And also we'll dive into Colts wide receivers and running backs currently on the roster and elsewhere. That's kind of our topic of conversation this week. But we do start with conference championship weekend, and very much as we should, I think, with the 49ers-Lions game, because that was the more dramatic one, more the one that deserves a little bit more talking about. I'll say that I said at the time that I was surprised they didn't kick the field goal, but that's what Dan Campbell kind of is. I think is the other side of the argument. That he's been aggressive all year. Why would he stop now? As you guys were watching this NFC Championship game, what was your impression of the decisions that went down?
I would have kicked the second one. I just would have to tie the game and then put the onus back on the Niners, and they probably would have scored. That would have been a moot point. But and again, I understand that he's aggressive. I understand that. What I wish that someone would have asked, maybe they did, and it wouldn't have gotten answered, is did you go for both, maybe especially the second one, because that's who you are, or because you just didn't trust your kicker? And, you know, they put out there on social media that Badgley was...
Michael Badgley, former Colt himself.
Really? Wasn't he like 70% from 40 to 48 or whatever it was? So, but then my question is, what were the percentages to convert fourth and two,
right,
as opposed to the 65 or 70% kicker? So, you know, because all the analytics said it was like a flip of the coin.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but what about how much did the fact that they simply didn't trust their kicker play into it? And if that's the case, shame on them for having that kicker.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, at that point, you're right. And Matt, I'll say that if the analytics are a flip of the coin, you understand why Dan Campbell would rather put the game in the hands of Jared Goff, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jahmyr Gibbs, instead of on the foot of Michael Badgley, if it is really 6 to 1, half dozen to the other.
Yeah, it's such a tough call. I mean, we saw this a little bit with Steichen a couple of times this year, where it's like it's okay sometimes to take the points, and I know that there's an analytics component to it, but there's also kind of a gut feeling component to it. And you know, like in that Baltimore game, of course, the Colts did not get very far into Baltimore territory, so they were reserved to taking long field goals, but they took those long moves.
But they didn't force the issue.
Right, they didn't force the issue. And I felt like, especially, man, the Lions, that fumble as well just really killed them. And you're just like, you guys need to get something going here. You need to get some points, maybe put a little bit more pressure on the 49ers. And instead of doing that, they just kind of let the 49ers lap them at the end of the game.
Yep. If you follow me on Twitter at DaveG_sports, you know that I disagreed with both decisions to go for it. I just thought at the time, like the first one, to go up 3 scores before halftime, you would have had a 17-point lead. That would have been big. And then the second one, of course, to tie things back up, as it were. And I believe you're right, Mike. I think that Badgley's conversion percentage, 40 to 48, is about 70%. And then I think it was 48 plus, or right in that range, is about 50%. So let's just say he makes one of the two. If he makes one of the two, you're tied up at the end of the day. You're going...
Or if he makes the one earlier,
you're winning.
You're
at
winning,
that point.
and it's 3 scores, and possessions are fewer.
Like if you're purely playing the percentages, that in that sense, like it just made so much sense to me in both situations to go in the situation. I love aggressive coaching, love it, love going for it on 4th down if the situation is right. I thought in both situations it was wrong, but again, Dan Campbell's the head coach of the Detroit Lions. I am here, the host of the Colts Blue Zone Podcast. He has the right to do what he wants to do, and he brought the Lions to a place they have not been in forever and a day. One step away from the Super Bowl, and they've never been to a Super Bowl before. So there's a lot of. I know I have some good friends who are Lions fans who I've met over the years and over my stops here and there and across the country, and they all love Dan Campbell, every one of them. But of course, in the moment, just based on the result, it's always hard to take. And the Lions fans once again end the season with disappointment there. What about the other side? If you want to say something else first.
One thing that I disagreed with a lot of people said, well, they were playing with house money. They'll be back. You don't know. Let's talk to Dan Marino about how many times he was going to get back. So no, when you're there, it's like the Colts with 4th and 2 or whatever it was. You just don't know what next year is going to be. So you got to strike while it's there. Also, one last thing on that is, it's for every great comeback, which that was, the other team has to really, really help you. The Colts didn't lose that 33-0 lead because they did things right, and the Vikings did everything,
everything better.
Everything better. No, it's because you gave them X number of helps. So, but yeah, it was. It got to have all those. Was it 30,000 people at the stadium in Detroit?
Oh yeah,
brutal.
Yeah,
wow,
just brutal in that sense. Yeah. What about the other side? The Chiefs and the Ravens. Ravens were playing as hot as anybody going into this game, and then the Chiefs defense. I know so much attention's on the offense and Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce, as it should be. Kelce had himself one heck of a day and a heck of a first half, especially. But it was the defense really that shut down Lamar Jackson and the offense, and really very much limited what they were able to do. And now the Chiefs are going back once again to the Super Bowl.
What struck me the most is that Lamar Jackson is going to win a second MVP, and right now his career, for better or for worse, is so much like Peyton Manning's, as far as MVPs and not quite there, not quite getting it done in the playoffs. It took Peyton, was it 5 or 6 years?
A long time.
Was his first playoff win in 2003? I think it was.
Yeah.
So
5 years in,
and again, until Lamar Jackson changes the script, that's what's going to follow him. Is hey, great numbers, but what do you do when it really matters? And anybody that bets against Patrick Mahomes, you're just stupid. I mean, how much? And again, how many times during the second half of the season had people buried the Chiefs because of lack of this and receivers and all this, and here they are.
It's funny. Last week, right here on this Colts Blue Zone podcast, when we gave our predictions for the game, I said I was rolling with the Ravens because of how they'd played, but I didn't want to bet against Mahomes. And that's how it is now. He's reached that level, as you said, Chap. That do you bet against him? No, it doesn't matter what else is going on. Like, he's been there before. He's achieved it before. He's done it before. Why would you think anything else is going to happen right now? It's Brady level in the playoffs.
Yes.
That you just can't expect him to do anything else. And how many times was Brady buried throughout his career and still came back to win another 2?
Well, they got beat down one year in like the second or third week. Was it 48 or 50 to nothing?
And they
were
like 1-3 on the year,
right.
And everyone was calling for his head and saying, should Garoppolo start, or whoever the heck was their backup at the time? It was probably Garoppolo.
And it wasn't Brady that said it, but another quarterback just said, relax.
Yes.
Well,
another quarterback.
And Brady inside was saying, relax, we got this.
Yep.
And more times than not, they had this.
Remarkable what the Chiefs have done. And Matt, to see Patrick Mahomes, once again, top of the AFC. He's there until someone can knock him off.
Absolutely. And so much has been made of the Chiefs and their receivers not being able to, and they did not have like the most fantastic offensive game on the face of the earth. This was one that was carried by the defense, but the offense did what it needed to do in this game. That last throw from Mahomes to Valdez-Scantling.
Those were remarkable.
I'm remarkable because that closed the door on
Falling back.
Falling back. It was not like, it was a tough catch. And this guy who has had his share of problems this year made that big play in that big moment.
I'll add before we move on, the four, we're not talking about Colts tight ends this week. We might get into them next week or the week after. But the four teams here at the end of the year, they're tight ends. Travis Kelce, Hall of Famer eventually. Mark Andrews, one of the best in the league. Sam Laporta, the best rookie tight end in the league, had himself a tremendous season in Detroit.
Iowa?
He went to Iowa.
They
tight end factory.
They grow tight ends.
And George Kittle, another Iowa tight end there. Four pretty darn good tight ends there on these last four teams that are still alive in the playoffs.
And we know the Colts value tight ends.
They do. Mm-hmm.
So it'll be that'll be a nice show we have on, because I've seen a couple of mock drafts have had them taking the kid from Georgia.
That'd be fantastic if he drops that far, Brock Bowers. Yeah, we'll get into tight ends in a future podcast. Like I said, today we're doing wide receivers, running backs in a little bit. First, we'll touch on news around the league. The Falcons have hired Raheem Morris as their new head coach after interviewing Bill Belichick, as Matt points out here in our rundown, about 75 times, give or take one or two. But it's a second chance at a head coaching job for Morris. He coached Tampa Bay for a couple seasons before he was fired in 2001. He was very young when he got that job, 33 years old. And that doesn't often work out. That's why, Sean McVay getting a head coaching job at 30 years old or however old he was is the outlier for coaches who get the job quite that early in their careers. And Morris actually had been the interim head coach, I believe it was, of the Falcons and before he got that job with Tampa Bay. I believe that's the order it came in. That's how he got that job, kind of. He got that experience, and then Tampa said, "Hey, we'll try this guy," and it didn't work. But Morris has been very good as a defensive coordinator out in L.A. with the Rams for the past couple years, and had been interviewed, I believe, for the Colts job last year. Chapp.
Everybody was interviewed for the Colts job.
That's a fair point.
Yeah. They interviewed me.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Low key didn't get reported out much in the media.
Mine was a Zoom.
Oh.
They didn't fly me in from Beech Grove.
Nice. But Raheem Morris gets the job. It kind of leaves Bill Belichick on the outside looking in, Chap, right now. The only two openings left are the Washington Commanders and Seattle Seahawks as we tape this podcast.
Which he's been linked to neither one.
No,
Did he only interview with
the only one I'm aware of. Yeah, and well, he's not necessarily linked to the Dallas Cowboys, but Jerry Jones, of course, comes out at the Senior Bowl the other day and says, "I can work with him.
I can see us working together."
Absolutely.
What's Mike McCarthy think? I mean, really?
Right? Come on. Like, I know Jerry likes to talk, but come on.
Come on, man.
It's from watching how the access we have covering the Colts and our routines and post game and all this. I think it'd be kind of cool to have an owner, not necessarily Irsay, but talk, once a month or whatever. Jerry's there. He's got his own radio show.
Yep.
And the Dallas papers have to have a guy or two after every game. That's where they go. They don't go to the locker room. They go to Jerry.
Who cares about the locker room?
Right. And how you're a head coach, I was going to say GM, but there's no GM. But the head coach, how you respond to things, not knowing what the boss is saying in the corridor down the way. That's why I just wonder how he and Belichick would ever coexist, because these are two mega alpha dogs. And I'm wondering if that's why that Belichick was not the guy in Atlanta that he wanted more, not necessarily money, but more control. Not more, but all control. But, like we've got on here, we've got two other spots open, and there's, Mike Vrabel's still out there. Mm-hmm. What's up with him? It'd be very interesting to see what these last two spots go to.
And, of course, Frank Reich's still out there. Not that I've heard his name linked with anything either there right
now. Even coordinator-wise.
No, haven't heard that yet. That kind of depends on the coaches and who goes where and all that stuff.
Other than a small subset of Philadelphia Eagles fans advocating for him to come back as offensive coordinator, I've not heard anything about Frank Reich.
How awkward would that be? I'm not saying it wouldn't happen, but wow.
Yeah, that'd be something different. I do want to correct something real quick about Raheem Morris. He got the interim head coaching job job in Atlanta after his time as head coach in Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay, he had the job back in 2009. He was with the Falcons between 2015 and 2020, and then kind of filled in after Dan Quinn was fired after starting the season 0-5. Anyway, the Commanders' job should be attractive because they have a top pick there in the draft. They're going to get a nice quarterback to build around for the future, you would imagine there, or a boatload of picks if they want to kick the can down the road and go with someone else in the future. So then the Seahawks, like I said, so a team that was right on the cusp of the playoff race.
Is Pete Carroll still an advisor on that?
He's got to be, yeah, exactly.
Allegedly.
So,
Maybe that's why there's no coach in there yet.
Right? Yeah.
My
can't find anyone like Pete.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Pete just steps right back in all of a sudden. No, that's probably not going to happen. Colts, 3 Colts added to the Pro Bowl games roster. We already knew that Quentin Nelson was a selection before this the fill-in.
He's 6 for 6 now, right?
He is, yes. 6 years, 6 Pro Bowls.
Amazing.
Yes, it is. And joining him, the first 2 announced were Ryan Kelly and DeForest Buckner. They were Pro Bowl alternates. We already knew that. They're going to fill in for Chiefs players Creed Humphrey and Chris Jones, who, of course, will be slightly busy in the coming weeks as they get prepared for the Super Bowl. And then, how about it, your Pro Bowl quarterback.
Didn't have him on my bingo card.
For the Indianapolis Colts, Gardner Minshew himself. Unreal. And it's a funny way how it happened. Like, I was looking yesterday when the announcement came on the NFL's website, and they tell you there, everyone, like, who they're filling in for. And for Gardner Minshew, it said TBA. I was like, what's going on here? What are we doing? We're just throwing him in for the heck of it, that he gets to go into the Pro Bowl because. But hey, we're not complaining. Gardner's certainly not complaining. He can call himself a Pro Bowler for the rest of his career now.
It's on there. They don't remove that.
Exactly. And he was not listed as an alternate at first. There were a bunch of other quarterbacks.
There were like 6
ahead of him.
There were like 6 Colts that were listed as alternates.
Yes, there were.
Yeah, because Pitt and Zaire Franklin also were alternates, if I recall.
Zaire still deserves that spot. Let me tell you about that.
He put that on social media.
And he let everybody know.
Exactly. He knew exactly what
and
he
thought.
And
he was 100% correct as well.
That. Yes, we'll include that. But now Gardner Minshew is a quarterback going to the Pro Bowl games after everyone and their mom apparently is just saying, nah, I can't make it. So whether it's Patrick Mahomes going to the Super Bowl, Lamar Jackson stepping aside, whether it's Josh Allen for whatever the heck reason, whether it's who else was there? Trevor Lawrence with his injury coming into the year.
And I think Justin Herbert as well.
Justin Herbert as well for some reason if he was injured near the end of the year. C.J. Stroud gets a spot there in the Pro Bowl games as well as a fill-in for either Mahomes or Jackson or however it works.
Supposed to work.
Both of those guys stepping down. So, but this might not quite be at the same level as Tyler Huntley getting a Pro Bowl nod for 5 starts a couple years ago. But to say that Gardner Minshew had a Pro Bowl season still kind of makes me shake my head a little bit and be like, all right, if that's what it comes down to.
Yeah, that's again, you don't know the process. And more and more, the Pro Bowl has just lost its luster as far as what it means. And when we do the Pro Football Hall of Fame, our selection meeting, Pro Bowl or All Pro means a zillion times more than a Pro Bowl. I remember back in the day, a Miami Dolphins linebacker, John Offerdahl, misses the first 11 games of the season with a torn pec or something, and he makes a Pro Bowl because it was so much on name value. It's too bad, but hey, you're on there, and it's look in the Colts media guide. It's got all pros, it's got Pro Bowls, and you're up there. And once you're there, it's in 5 years they really want to ask, how did he get there? It's just He made the Pro Bowl in 2023.
And now Gardner Minshew, Matt, a free agent this offseason, can say, hey, I'm a Pro Bowl quarterback.
Just imagine the resume if it had been Pro Bowl playoff quarterback as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Really.
So now I think less of Shane Steichen that he couldn't get this team past Houston with a Pro Bowl quarterback.
Exactly. Come on, Shane. What the heck's going on here? Gracious sakes alive. But we will see exactly what...
Will you watch any of the Pro Bowl stuff?
I highly doubt it. I will probably see clips on Twitter, and that's about it. I don't think I'll tune in.
It's crazy. Everybody's been complaining and piling on about how bad it is, and it's always it'll draw more than an NBA game.
Honestly, it will. But the last memorable moment I have from the Pro Bowl is when Sean Taylor almost killed Brian Moorman, 20 years ago, however long that was. So, I mean, that speaks to it's not like it's interesting at the time, but it doesn't have any lasting impact, it seems like.
Well, and it's the one all-star game that you just can't play it because it's physical. And these guys, and that's where it got to be to where they had to go to flag football and all these skill tests because players, they got to the point that they weren't even doing anything because they weren't going to put themselves in harm's way, which I understand.
Yep. And for defensive linemen and offensive linemen, it's the most farcical of farces.
They stand up and they sort of push each other. And
you can't do anything.
Right. Well, and then I mean, gosh, in the course of a normal game, a guy gets pushed over onto the back of your leg, and then it's a grievous injury. And even in a Pro Bowl, something like that could just accidentally happen with this sport, just the way it is.
They had a guy back in the day. Again, I'm always dating myself, but Buffalo had a running back named Robert Edwards. And back in the Pro Bowl, they had beach football, and he tore every ligament. I'm not sure he ever played again. It was at the Pro Bowl, and he tore every ligament in his knee.
I think he did come back, but he was never even remotely close to the same.
Obviously, back then, the Pro Bowl, you had to really earn it.
Yeah.
He had a great year, good year, and it was an awful injury.
That was the watershed moment of turning the Pro Bowl kind of on its head from what it was to what it is now. I promise that was it. Seeing the Robert Edwards injury in beach football,
right?
Nevertheless, to completely change a young, dynamic player. Like I said, I think he was a rookie that year. I'm 99% positive he was a rookie, and so now. Nobody cares. Well, nobody tried.
I did watch because I was curious. I hadn't watched the Pro Bowl for years, and my fondest memory is probably idiot liquored up kicker who went off and ran his mouth.
What a great memory!
I'm ready to throw a touchdown to Jerry Rice.
Exactly. But I did watch last year because it was the first time they'd done the format, and you had Eli and Peyton Manning mic'd up because they were the respective teams' coaches, and there was some fun little gamesmanship and stuff like that. But as far as a sporting event goes, not high entertainment value.
No, instead, we will see kick-tack-toe. We'll see dodgeball. We'll see best catch. We'll see so many other competitions out there.
They're doing a long snapping trick competition as well. Might be kind of interesting. And then they will have the championship. Pro Bowl games championship is the Sunday game, and that's the flag football game.
Well,
there's got to be something else on we can watch.
We watch with bated breath as to what comes out. I'm sure there'll be some fantastic television programming on Fox 59 and CBS 4, so you can always check out what's going on there if you're living in Central Indiana. Let's get to our main topic of this Colts Blue Zone podcast. We're going down position by position, kind of wrapping up what the Colts got from certain positions throughout this past season and analyzing where they stand as this 2024 offseason is set to begin. We still have 2 months or a month and a half, really, until free agency begins. That's on March 13th. 1 week before that, March 5th, is when teams, I believe, or maybe that's the last date.
It's the last
date. Excuse me, the first date. Thank you, Matt. It's February 20th. So like 3 weeks from us today, as we tape this podcast, is when clubs can start to designate franchise or transition players. And that could be a significant date for our current topic of discussion today, at least half of it, with wide receivers and also Colts running backs looking ahead for them right now.
They might want to franchise Zach Moss.
Exactly, yeah. I don't know who else I'd be talking about. So looking at the wide receivers first, because that's the one that is going to be at least the most focused for the next 3 weeks in terms of the Colts in the offseason, about their top receiver in Michael Pittman Jr. This year, Pitt had career highs in receptions, 109, yards, 1,152. He also added 4 touchdowns and a 10.6 yards per catch average. He is a free agent. After that, the two primary wide receivers receiving passes, or
as they want to do.
Exactly, as one does. Josh Downs, the rookie, had 68 catches for 771 yards, 2 touchdowns, averaged 11.3 per catch. And also Alec Pierce, 32 catches. He had 2 touchdowns, averaged 16.1 yards per catch, and led all receivers, Alec Pierce did, with over 1,000 snaps on the Colts.
Who was their number 4 receiver? Do you remember? Catches?
I would imagine it was Isaiah McKenzie.
Yep, 11.
Yes, 11. So it is a big drop down after those top three. And that's understandably so. You get down to your fourth receiver, typically across the NFL, you're not going to get too many catches.
I want more than 11.
Right, yeah, maybe. Yeah. But you also have
You'd like
tight
to have
ends.
somebody with, maybe 25 catches, something along those lines?
Right.
You also have tight ends to need balls. You have running backs that need balls.
And these guys use tight ends a bunch, which we'll get to in a week or two.
Right. So I understand why there's that big drop-off at least. You could still want more, perhaps, but I understand why that drop-off is there.
Well, in the phrase you just used, want more, that has to be bandied about when you talk about Michael Pittman. I will be beyond stunned if he's not back next year. The question is it the franchise tag, which is roughly $21 million, or is it going to be one of those $22 to $25 million a year contracts? And I think it's a very valid argument. I was looking, and he's had the last 2 years, his first 2 years, he averaged 12.9 and 12.6, I think it was. 12.6 and 12.3. The last 2 years, with over 200 catches, he's averaged 9.9 per catch. That's just not what you want
from your number one wide receiver that you're paying $20 million plus to.
Right, and what in the internal discussion that they need to have and they will have is that a function of him being, this is who he is, or is this what we have reduced him to with our quarterbacks? As you've mentioned, the 27-7 guy, he averaged 12.5 yards a catch.
You got to listen to that podcast last week, people. If you didn't, by the way, go all the way to the end, the last 5-6 minutes of it. Very important discussion that we had.
It's him whose name I won't mention, okay? Because you
led Michael Pittman to probably his best season.
Well, but also so did Phillip Rivers. I'll mention his name.
Yes, you can.
But so what you have to decide is, have we restricted him, or is this who he is? And if this is who he is, I don't know that it matters, because you got to pay him. Because there's nothing in the pipeline to say, well, if we let him go, we'll do. If you let him go, but you knew you could get T. Higgins, would you do it? I don't know that I would. First, you're going to pay.
You're going to pay him the same amount of money.
You may pay him more,
if not more.
You may pay him more because he is a free agent, and there will be bidders. So to me, if you're going to bring in one of those guys, it's going to be $25 million. So with Pittman, and you think you know, but you don't know. With Pittman, you know what you got. And I think one of the driving themes of Pittman in these discussions is he is, and we've talked about this, he is exactly the kind of player that Ballard wants on this roster. He brings everything except the deep threat, but I mean, so being a player. He's tough, almost to the edge of being too aggressive. We've seen that, but that's fine. But he answers the bell. He gets the tough catches. He gets lit up and he gets up. So I think this is such a fascinating player to talk about. And the one quote that sticks in my mind is, because this is a position that Ballard has not invested in over the top. Yeah, was it like 3 second-round picks they've done, going back to Paris Campbell? But they've never paid the big money. I mean, even remotely big money. But when we talked about it in January, and the receiver market came up, he said, well, the market is what it is. And if you got to pay $4 a gallon for gas, then that's what you got to pay. So I think he's braced himself for what it might cost to go long term.
And for Pittman, or for any one of these young receivers like T. Higgins, you brought up Gabe Davis, another one who's reaching free agency.
But he's been a two. He's been a two.
He has been. He's different than, he's not at the same level as either Pittman or Higgins.
Is Justin Jefferson going to be a free agent?
Well, I doubt that the Vikings may allow that to happen.
Matt's got these on there.
Yeah, they're on the back.
And the problem when you look at these lists now is 80% of these guys aren't going to hit the market.
Right. A lot of them are going to get
Mike Evans.
franchise tagged.
Yeah, Mike Evans
He's had
is a good
is
one.
it 10 straight 1,000-yard seasons?
Ludicrous.
It's unbelievable.
He averaged 15.9 yards per catch this year at 30 years old. Mike Evans. Just I think that the average NFL fan knows Mike Evans is a really good player. I don't think they realize
They don't
how
appreciate
productive he has been, like how really super
One
productive
catch
he has
he
been.
made in the playoffs, down by the goal line, amazing.
Yeah, like he did it with Baker Mayfield this year, helped Baker to have his best season as a pro. Before that, it was Tom Brady. You can understand, obviously, production under Brady. Before that, it was Jameis Winston. Winston, well, like I've said here on this podcast, that Winston and Bruce Arians is a very unique combination in the fact that they both just want to go air it out, and who cares?
Then Arians sounds surprised that he throws interceptions.
Exactly.
Well, you set him up to do that.
And I've said, yeah, Jameis, that's like he needs a coach to reel him back, not to tell him to chuck it down. Like, I've known him since his early college days, and he anyway, we don't need to analyze Jameis Winston here on the Colts Blue Zone podcast. We might have last year when we were talking about potential
Mike
quarterbacks
Evans
the year
is 30.
before, but not anymore. Yeah, exactly. Mike Evans.
Are you going to give him $25 million at age 30? I mean, I don't know.
I think there are a lot of worse wide receivers out there, though. At the same at the same time,
Calvin Ridley, Gabe Davis.
Calvin Ridley's intriguing there.
Beckham, Tyler Boyd. And one of those guys, either Higgins or Boyd, are going to be there because they cannot pay, because they got to pay Jamar Chase next year.
Yep.
I think it is. So, but no, it's somebody. I think what's going to happen, what needs to happen, is you retain Pittman, however you want to do it.
Yep.
But then you still need to find a guy, whether it's one of these second tier free agents. Yes, a draft pick, I guess, but I'd rather have a veteran guy as my second or third guy.
You have a young guy right now in Josh Downs and another in Alec Pierce that you're really trying to
play 2 years.
Exactly, that you're trying to develop. And Pierce, you could argue, has been incredibly limited in his development the past 2 years because what he does best, the Colts quarterbacks have not done well the past couple years. And that's why, again, you go back to Michael Pittman and what his yards per catch has done these past 2 years, averaging less than 10 yards per catch over the last 2 years combined. Well, it's because you've had Matt Ryan at the end of his career throwing him the ball, and it's because you've had Gardner Minshew throwing him the ball, who doesn't have the best deep ball out of all the quarterbacks in the NFL. Now, he's had a couple pretty ones to Alec Pierce. I'm not saying he can't throw it deep, but I am saying he does not do that often, and that is not part of his strength as a quarterback, his big strength. I don't know. He's a Pro Bowl quarterback, though, so maybe he does everything better than we think he does.
I'm not changing my opinion of Gardner Minshew.
No.
But still.
But with Michael Pittman, let's talk about what the Colts could do. We have the option. The Colts have the option of franchise tagging him, and that would be, like you said, somewhere between $21 and $23 million. I think
it's 21.7.
Okay,
but
so there we go. $21.7 million for just this year, and that's a hard number for you. You get it. If they do that, they get him for one more year, and then after that, you can franchise tag him again, but that number goes up higher for that second year. A good couple $1 million. And then if you want
I'm not sure if it's 120% or there, because it's one thing people need to realize, and I had to look it up. The franchise number for these tags, it's the average of the top five in the position over the last 5 years.
Right.
That's just so you don't have a Tyreek Hill thing come in and just blow, just spike the market. So, and one thing that you might get to, so I'll just beat you to it, is if you franchise him, we need to check and see when he needs to be here. Because I don't think they see him on OTAs, and I just don't.
No, I doubt it.
I just don't. Now, maybe I just don't. I think you see him at the end of training camp or after they break camp.
Yep. And again, what that does to your relationship with your quarterback, Anthony Richardson, who needs reps with him, that is not good, I would say, in that light. But here's the deal. If you're the Colts, who else is out there as your number one? Like, who else is your go-to guy? I like Josh Downs, and I like Alec Pierce.
Neither one is remotely a one. This isn't like T.Y. Hilton, and maybe, no, they are who they are.
And if you really want to go elsewhere, Mike Evans is a number one. But, if he gets away from Tampa Bay, I would be stunned. Like, they're going to either franchise him or get him set to a deal. Who else here could be a number one receiver? Maybe Calvin Ridley. Maybe Maybe T. Higgins. Maybe he just looks really good because he's
got so much around him, and he's got a great quarterback behind him as well.
That's very possible.
And you worry about that with Gabe Davis too, because he's got Josh Allen and he's got Stefon Diggs.
So if you're gonna invest in someone, why not invest in the guy who already has some experience with Anthony Richardson, who has shown earlier in his career with quarterbacks that have better arms that he can be somewhat of a 12, 13 yards per catch guy and be your number one, and say the last 2 years, well, he was just kind of limited in what he could do.
We limited him.
So then,
right.
So then your decision becomes, do you franchise tag him or try to sign him? And obviously the Colts want to sign him, I think. Like Chris Ballard wants to sign him to a long-term deal.
He said, I realize we can use a tag. I think he even said
it's a tool, is what he said.
And it's sort of, I don't know whether he said it or implied it. It's something we don't want to do. But I keep thinking that a long-term deal for Pittman, 22, 23, whatever. Now, Pittman's got to be
reasonable.
Whatever reasonable is in free agency.
Right.
He can't come. I don't think he gets 25 from these guys. I just don't. And if he pushes it, then they'll
franchise tag him. Yeah.
But I just, again, I think if you can get him for that reasonable $23 million, I don't know.
And I guess reasonable is just both sides negotiating in good faith.
The top 10 receivers, the average is about $20 million. And I could argue that he's probably not top 10. I could probably find 10 receivers that I would take just because of what the total package and all this. Mm-hmm. But he's right there. Mm-hmm. And it's going to cost you more to let him walk and bring in whoever's left at the top of the list and say, whoever's there, that's our guy. And we're going to overpay. Because you're going to
have to.
You're going to overpay.
Right.
So, and again, it's so much better. And I know Ballard believes it's so much better to reinvest in your own, and he's done it time after time. A couple times hasn't worked. Mm-hmm. But you know the guy. You've had him in your building for 4 years, and you can do your homework. You can vet these free agents. But first of all, if a team lets one of these guys off into the market, well, why? Why does Tampa let Mike Evans get out there? And maybe they just don't want to pay that kind of money. I don't know. But it's just so much, I guess safer is the word, to reinvest a lot of money in your own.
So if you look at the other side of this equation, not the Colts, but from Michael Pittman's point of view, Pittman would love nothing more than to become a true free agent and to go out there.
Did you get that drift from him when we talked to him at the end of the year?
Yes, I did. And I don't think it was anything against the Colts as an organization or anything. He doesn't hate being here. He doesn't have any vitriol towards Chris Ballard or Shane Steichen. It was just that you look around the league and you see what wide receivers get paid. It would be prime opportunity for him right now as how old is he? 25, 26 in that range, 26-year-old in the prime of his career to go out and have absolutely no holds barred, say which team wants me, who wants to pay me more. It sets himself up beautifully for the future in his career.
He's going to get paid whatever.
Exactly.
He did mention he said I owe it to myself to do the due diligence to see what the best fit. He's not going to go to some team that's got nothing at quarterback. He's not.
Right.
He understands, but the times we've talked to him in groups, I've had a chance to talk to him through 2 or 3 times, one-on-one, just by ourselves. He's a businessman. He's a competitor. He knew when he had the number wrong because we used it wrong one time. And he said, I know the franchise tag's $23 million. Well, he read that. I mean, he knows. So, and good for him. Good for him. Every player, their goal needs to be that first free agent contract. Mm-hmm. That's the one that sets you up. And if he does it right, he'll get another one at age 31 or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. So, but no, he made it very clear that, hey, I really do like it here. But, and if anyone thinks that Michael Pittman's going to give these guys a hometown discount, you are delusional.
Absolutely not. And what's possible, Matt, you can franchise tag a player, basically, if you're a team, and say he's under contract when he signs it, of course, for $21 million or $21.7 million, and then you can spend the next however long, I think it's into June or July is when the final deadline is for renegotiating the long-term contract with that player. So then at that point, if you're the Colts, if you can't come to a deal with him, the best possible solution might be to franchise tag him so he can't go elsewhere and get a deal elsewhere.
Because you don't want to hit him the open market, because then you're going to be in a situation your number is going to go way up.
Yeah.
It's going to inflate at $2, $3, $4 million a year.
Right. So if you franchise tag him there at the end of February, he can't talk to other teams. And so you get the next couple months through July, so the next 5 months to come to some kind of long-term deal. And if you don't, well, then it's the franchise tag. It's 1 year. That's what you get. And you have to play on that tag, or you don't play at all, as we've seen from some players in the past that happen. So that's where the Colts stand with their number one receiver.
I think if Pittman's reasonable and the Colts are, there's got to be a notch or two above reasonable, then I think it gets done. But again, if he comes in and his baseline's $25 million, I just don't see it.
Yeah. So we'll see exactly what that is over the coming weeks. Like I said, 3 weeks now until the first day that teams can franchise tag players. The Colts have not franchise tagged a player since Pat McAfee, who absolutely loved that a couple years ago, way back. You'll hear Pat talk about that from time to time on his programming wherever he is. But
was the time before that Edgerrin?
Might have been.
They franchised Edgerrin in 2005, I think it was.
Mm-hmm. That was way back before the differences of rookie contracts, and he was already quite a few years into his career.
He had like a 7-year contract as a rookie.
Yeah. That will be interesting to see. Josh Downs, Alec Pierce, those are your other two receivers right now. Let's talk Downs first, since he was the second most productive wide receiver. Pretty good rookie year, 68 catches. He had 11 yards per catch.
Rookie record for the Colts.
That's better than Pittman had in terms of average. Had a couple of big third down plays. He was reliable underneath. He was injured from time to time, so that even took down his level of production.
I bet we find out that he was more dinged up than what they let on, which happens a lot of times.
So that's usually the case, isn't it?
I just got a ESPN breaking news alert, by the way, from Adam Schefter on my phone. The Seahawks are expected to hire Ravens defensive coordinator Mike McDonald as their new coach. So there you go. Another defensive guy like Raheem Morris.
And then there was one.
Yep, exactly. Now there's one. It's the Washington Commanders. We'll see where they go. But anyway, Downs really eagerly anticipating seeing what he can do next year. I think with a full season with Anthony Richardson, I think his level of production might go down, honestly. Like if you look at what Gardner Minshew could do well and what Richardson does well, Richardson's a better downfield passer. He needs to work. He needs to get on the same page, especially in the first 8 games of the season. I think his production could be limited with Josh Downs, because he throws it deep better than he throws it short.
Yeah. And the intermediate stuff is not his strength
right
now.
Exactly. And that's not a terrible thing. I think if you come into next year and Josh Downs isn't doing at the start of the year what he did last year, I don't think that's reason to freak out about his future and his ability, because I do think it could take some time for him and Richardson to truly get on the same page and start clicking. It's much better, I think, for Alec Pierce, who's going to have a quarterback who can throw it 70 yards from his knees, and he'll, as long as he gets protection back there, if he's looking for him, Pierce might have a chance to go get it in a one-on-one situation deep. But based on those two guys, what do you think their future is in the works for the future with Anthony Richardson at quarterback?
I think Pierce has to be really excited. Same with position coach Reggie Wayne. I think it drove him crazy that they didn't take more shots. I was talking to Pierce on exit day, and I said, roughly how many times were you wide open? He said, I don't know, 10, 11. And just think if they hit 4 of those. I mean, the shock plays, and that's what was, I think, frustrating from a lot of people's points of view. And there were a couple times that Pierce is open, and Minshew is still in the pocket. It's not like he's running around. Sometimes you see receivers wide open, and the quarterback's running around while he didn't see you because he's
running for his life.
Yeah, he's got 2 guys chasing after him right now.
So I do think in no player off the top of my head will have more scrutiny on him going into the next season than Alec Pierce. So people are already throwing around the bust description, which I'm not there yet, because I do think that while Pittman was really limited by this passing game, Pierce really was. Because I don't want to call him a one-trick pony, but that's his game, is going deep and chasing balls and all that. And Downs, maybe his catches go down a little bit, but maybe his yards per catch go up.
Possible, yeah.
Because I think he showed us some run after the catch things. And if you can get the outside working and find that tight end who's more consistent. I mean, these guys had tight ends of the week, it seemed like, every other week. And have a legitimate threat downfield. And, oh, by the way, then you have Jonathan Taylor and whoever running back number 2 is. I think Pierce and Downs could see a bump next year.
Yeah, Downs could also be a good break-the-pocket guy. When Richardson gets flushed out, like he's on the short route, he's looking back. So he could be looking back in the backfield quite a bit if he's on some more shorter routes. And he sees Anthony Richardson break out to the side, so he breaks away immediately from his coverage guy, whoever it might be. So I could be wrong when I say he takes a step back at the start of next year, which right now I might expect. But at the same, like just thinking about it in a slightly different way, maybe he does get that bump, especially in terms of yards per catch. Matt, what are your thoughts about those two guys, Downs and Pierce, looking ahead to next year?
I was really excited when they picked Downs. I thought he'd be a really good receiver, and then he has a certain savviness out there in the receiving game that kind of veterans of the game sometimes display. So I really like that from Downs. I think your point's good on that as far as maybe not getting at those intermediate routes as much, because that is the bread and butter of Minshew. But one thing that we did see a lot in training camp and early in the season was that, yeah, Josh Downs was a safety blanket for Minshew, but he was also a safety blanket a lot of times for Richardson when he was in. So we'll just kind of see how that develops. I really hope that Alec Pierce can have a breakout year next season. It's been kind of a tough haul for him because he's been kind of on a quarterback carousel. You know, it's Sam Ehlinger one week. It was Nick Foles. It was Matt Ryan. And then we go to Gardner Minshew. None of these guys who play to his strengths. And I know one-trick pony and that sort of thing, but the guy likes to get downfield and get that ball up there and get it to him. And he just has not been able to play to the strength of his game, which Anthony Richardson will allow him to do. So, but I tell you what, outside of those three guys, looking at the wide receiving core and some of those other names that are on there, man,
they won't be here next year.
It is essential for them to make sure that they get Pittman locked down, because if they don't, it's pretty rough.
Isaiah McKenzie, 11 catches, 82 yards, averaged 7.5 yards per catch. And then DJ Montgomery, in very limited action, saw 3 receptions, 58 yards, and a touchdown. Averaged 18.7 yards per catch.
Got to use him more.
Exactly. Very limited action. Also on the active roster, practice squad or injured list, Ashton Doolin, if you remember back to the start of last year, he is still under contract for this coming season.
What do you have, an ACL?
I believe it was an ACL. So he got lost at the start of the year. Special teams ace, also time to time. Dave's breakout candidate for 2021 or whatever it was a couple years ago, maybe 2022. Never did happen. But I always remember that here on the Colts Blue Zone podcast. Amari Rogers, practice squad. He's no longer listed on the team's website, though, so maybe his contract did expire with the team. Juwan Winfrey, Terrell Bynum, Tyree Cleveland, Ethan Fernea, who made it to the active roster at the end of this year, played a couple snaps even. And he's been just a training camp body and then practice squad body for the past couple years. So we've seen him running around quite a bit, but actually to play on the active roster, get 2 snaps after a couple years of really doing yeoman's work, and got to be rewarding for him, at least just to see the field. But in terms of a player who's going to be a meaningful contributor, none of those guys. A
couple of those guys will be back, because those are the kind of guys you bring back to fill out the roster, training camp, and then you don't know. But like I said, you've got to lock up Pittman, and still, then you've got to find, I think, a number 2.
Absolutely.
I don't think either one of these guys are 2s, Downs or Pierce. Whether that's, I would prefer a veteran guy, 25, 26 years old, as opposed to another young guy, because like you mentioned, they've got 2 young guys they're trying to develop now.
If you look at the free agent wide receivers, we've mentioned Mike Evans, we've mentioned Calvin Ridley, Gabe Davis, T. Higgins. Who else have we mentioned here? I think those are maybe the only ones we mentioned from this list, but there's a good slew of other players here who will be free agents. Marquise Brown, from the Cardinals, Darnell Mooney from the Bears, Odell Beckham Jr. From the Ravens, Tyler Boyd from the Bengals, Curtis Samuel from the Commanders, Kendrick Bourne from the Patriots, DJ Chark from the Panthers. I like DJ Chark. Michael Thomas from the Saints, who is he still the NFL single season receptions lead? Yeah, he broke
He had
Marvin's
injuries
record.
that cost him like 2 years.
Yeah, the last couple years, Michael Thomas has been unfortunately banged up. Josh Reynolds from the Lions, who had a couple of unfortunate drops himself in that loss to the 49ers in the NFC Championship game. Former IU standout Nick Westbrook-Akine with the Titans. KJ Osborne for the Vikings. Noah Brown for the Texans. Again, these are players that they're fine players. They're good players. They're not incredibly productive players. So if you're looking for someone to be a reliable, productive number two, how many of them are there? Well, there may be a few, or there can be a number one, like a Mike Evans, T. Higgins. That's why we talked about those guys at the beginning. And Calvin Ridley, perhaps. But after that, there's a whole lot of contributors. There's not a whole lot of difference makers in that list. And that goes to your point, Chap, that difference makers typically get locked up by their teams.
Right. Yeah. But again, one of these guys, one of these type of guys needs to be on this team because, again, so much, at least next year, even moving forward, you got to give the quarterback a good supporting cast of skilled players, or you're simply wasting his early years. You're wasting his rookie contract, which it is a huge bonus. In a couple of years, you're going to have to pay, I'm going to write about him later in the week, Bernard Ryman. He's your left tackle. They're expensive. And if you
What?
get it,
Really?
I know, because we've seen the other end. So you've always got to. That's why it's better to have that long-term deal, because you can maneuver or massage how you want to do the years and all that. But they've got things, and again, they've got we've talked about other free agents they got to deal with. But you have got to get the quarterback with the right people around him, offensive line and skill set. And that's imperative this offseason.
Well, a guy who's not around Anthony Richardson, but next to Anthony Richardson in the backfield would be Jonathan Taylor. We'll spend the last couple minutes of this Colts Blue Zone podcast focusing on the running backs. And it's good that Jonathan Taylor is now here. We don't have to speculate anymore. We don't have to have binoculars focused on Jim Irsay's trailer anymore to see who's going in and out and how long they're staying in, and massive discussions and analysis about Jonathan Taylor's body language on the side of the field during Colts training camp.
Or holding in and all that stuff.
Right? Where is he? Is he here? Is he elsewhere? It doesn't matter. He's here.
Sometimes we didn't know because they wouldn't tell us.
Exactly. He's a Colt. He's been paid. And it's not often in the NFL that running backs get decent contracts. And he did get a good contract, Mike, last year from the Colts. There's an obvious point by the Colts front office and coaching staff to somewhat build an offense with Jonathan Taylor at or near the center of it. If you can add a dynamic receiver on the outside, you'd certainly want to do so. But there's going to be a lot, no matter who is playing wide receiver for the Colts next year, a lot of the offense they want to design around a dynamic running game with Taylor and, of course, Anthony Richardson as well.
And, you can argue both ways how, his on the downside paying guy is he had the greatest season by a Colts running back ever. And this franchise has had, Edgerrin and Falk and Dickerson, and they didn't make the playoffs. And he rushes for 188 against Houston, and they lose. Well, that, I would argue more than you would about the quarterback play long-term in the season, and certainly the quarter. What would his impact have been against Houston had they gotten even moderate quarterback play? So what was it, 3 years, $42 million? So they made the commitment to him.
And that starts next year. It wasn't
Right.
this past year,
Right.
year one. No, the
Right.
next year is the first of that three.
So it showed you their commitment. And again, we can't harp on enough. He and Richardson played one play together. Mm-hmm. One. And that's you look back at that, sure, all they did, and they only had their guys together for that one play. But again, to add Pittman to keep long-term. Remember, Pittman, it's crazy. People forget Pittman was taken in the draft before Taylor.
Yes, he was. Two or three picks before.
I think
him.
it was 7. It was 34 and 41, I think
really?
it was.
It was that much? I didn't know.
Yeah, I think it was.
It was that much.
Maybe no, I think because I've used it. I think it's 7 spots.
Okay.
But remember, they went into that year and said, we need to get more explosive players. Mm-hmm. Well, that's what Ballard said this year as well. We need explosive players. And I don't know if I consider Pittman an explosive player. I don't know. I think he was mentioning we need to add explosive players. to the roster. So
right.
But it just makes you wonder. And I'm watching all these playoff games, and I see the impact of that mobile quarterback who the defense wins. They win the play. They win the play, and then he blows the defense away with something he does that's other guys can't do. And to have Richardson running the RPO with Taylor is not even comparable to Gardner Minshew running it because Richardson can really do some damage. So they value Taylor. You just hope you get 14 games out of him, out of a running back.
I mean, yeah. I always thought back when this was still a thing and maybe the Colts were going to trade Jonathan Taylor that the Ravens were the obvious choice to send him. And I thought that in the AFC Championship game, that was evident. Like for so long, Lamar Jackson carried them and did so much just by himself and found plays down the field. But the Chiefs really limited what he could do down the field with the weapons that they have. And they, to their credit, also kept him in the box. What do you need to do if they're shutting all that? You need a run game. You need to loosen them up somehow. And they did not run the ball much. And that's what they were this entire year. The Ravens were a running back away. You could tell the entire year that if Lamar just keeps going off, there's nothing anybody's going to do. But if there's a team that can limit him, well, then after that, what are they? And so they were dynamic, but they were not multiple. So that's why, again, I thought you can go back and listen to this podcast at the time, that was the logical place if a team wanted Jonathan Taylor badly to take him. And the Ravens were in condition to do so. Obviously, they were one step away from the Super Bowl. Obviously, they didn't think at the time that he was the difference. I think he might have been that difference.
Or they weren't willing to pay what it was going to cost, either compensation-wise or 3 years, 40, because you weren't going to trade him. You weren't going to get him on a trade unless you were going to extend him.
Right.
So they had to do both.
Very possible. Again, very possible. I just thought that was the one thing that would have put them over the edge, and turned out they didn't get over the edge. So I need to toot my own horn a little bit here and there when it seems like I could be right, because there are many times when you guys both think that I'm wrong about certain other things when it comes to...
Just 27-7.
Exactly. And that's the only other thing that I'm everything else I'm right about it all the time. But if we look past Jonathan Taylor for the Colts, Zach Moss is going to be a free agent this offseason. He actually led the Colts in yardage, had 50 more yards than Jonathan Taylor did this year, had 5 touchdowns himself, 27 catches, 192 yards, 2 touchdowns. Does Zach Moss have a long-term spot on the Colts as Jonathan Taylor's number 2, Chap?
I don't think so, because I think he's going to get more. I know he's going to want more. I can't remember what his contract was this year. $3 million. Well, no, it was the end of his contract from the trade.
Right.
So I think he showed in his mind that he can get more, but it's such a bad market.
Yep.
Especially for backups or fringe starters. And I think they're bringing him back if they can get him for $2 million, which I don't think they can, $3 million. But would they take a guy mid-round, running back mid-round, maybe? With Taylor, I wouldn't mind a 4th or 5th round pick that you thought. Some mock draft had, maybe it was somebody's, the Michigan running back.
Blake Corum.
Oh, Blake
right.
Corum. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how high you have to get him. I think there'll be a different backup. I just think Zach Moss believes he can get more and probably can get more from somebody else.
Yeah, I think that's the problem with Zach Moss staying here. He knows that everything that we just said, that Jonathan Taylor's the guy they're building around.
He won't get 770 yards this year.
That he's the explosive one, that he's the guy that they want more explosive players. Well, Jonathan Taylor's an explosive player, for crying out loud. They want him on the field. So at best, Moss is going to get, I don't know, 1/4 of the running back touches here next year, maybe
5 or 6
30%.
carries a game. I don't know.
Yeah,
and maybe that's low, but I don't know.
But elsewhere, he will get significantly more. And if you're a running back, you need to be on the field. You need to be productive, because that's what you need to show teams that you're valuable. And if you want more contracts, running backs might only get 2-year contracts right now. If you want to get 2 more contracts in your career, you can't afford to spend a year getting 25-30% of a team's running back touches. You need to go out there and replace where you know you're going to get at least 40-45.
The career is shorter, so
exactly.
You have to cash in while you can.
So if we see Zach Moss back with the Colts next year, I'd be very surprised.
According to Spot Rack, his base salary was $1.1 million.
Okay,
which was the last year of his rookie contract.
Right.
Okay. So he'd want to definitely cash in more than that.
After those 2 players, Moss and Taylor, we had Trey Sermon, Tyler Goodson, Jake Fugg, Funk, Evan Hall, all getting at least one carry. And also on the roster, Xavier Scott, who is on injured reserve, I think, pretty early in the year. Out of all those players, Sermon had a pretty solid game or two here and there in filling in. Not a number one back by any stretch, but a fill-in here and there, averaged 4.6 yards per carry. Tyler Goodson had really a very good year in terms of when he was on the field, 13 carries, 87 yards, averaged 6.7 yards per catch. Had 6 catches for 9 yards, but...
He had 7 for 11.
Exactly. It was just the one that was... You can argue not the best pass. You can argue should have been caught. I don't think we need to rehash that now. We've done plenty of that over the past podcasts. But both of those guys showed some production in limited roles. You could argue that either one of them or both of them could be signed on to be part of the Colts backfield in the future. I would be eager to see what Evan Hall can do because he was the guy who was drafted last year. He was, I believe, a 5th-round pick.
Was it a knee? I saw him in the locker room a lot.
Yeah, it was early in the year, and it was either a knee or a foot or a lower leg or something. And
I thought it was a knee.
Yeah, and he was, again, a really athletic guy, as the Colts always draft athletic guys, and we'll definitely talk about that more as we get into our draft preview shows. But Hall was a very good pass catcher at Northwestern, and if you're looking for a guy to fill in that pass-catching role, because it's not Jonathan Taylor's strength, he can catch the ball, no doubt, but if you're looking for the Nyheim Hines, if you're looking for lightning to the thunder, maybe
this guy might be.
Evan Hall is that guy. So you need to get him on the field and see if he can play a little bit. Again, another guy that would take carries away from Zach Moss because you want to get Evan Hall on the field. You want to see what you got. I promise the Colts want to see. So he would be potential to be on the roster next year. After that, guys that you might want to bring back, it depends on the price, it depends on what other offers they get, and exactly how you want to fill out your roster, Chap, I believe, moving forward.
I don't mean to diminish it, but that's down the list of priorities. They'll fill out the running back room, but again, I'd be more inclined to think they'll take a mid to a late round pick on a running back as opposed to getting one in early free agency because they're not going to pay for a backup running back.
No, or if they don't draft somebody late, they are very, very good at unearthing an undrafted free agent from somewhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if it's Jonathan Taylor, Trey Sermon, Evan Hall, and then a draft pick. If those are your 4, that makes a lot of sense. And then after that, undrafted rookies, like you said, like if it looks something like that next year, that would make a whole lot of sense.
A lot of sense for the Colts.
Exactly. If you're not going to invest much more in the running back room because you just invested a ton in Jonathan Taylor.
Gave over the mother load to Taylor.
Yeah. So that's what wide receivers and running backs look like. Over the course of the future, we have certainly plenty to talk about for the rest of this Colts roster. We have offensive line, tight ends, secondary, defensive line, linebackers, special teams to kind of break down where the Colts go from here. Super Bowl's coming up. Of course, the final Pro Football Hall of Fame vote will be announced over the coming weeks as well at the NFL Honors Ceremony next week. We are talking about pushing back our Colts Blue Zone podcast next week so we can chat about those results after they happen on next Thursday night. So if you don't see us on Wednesday or Thursday, don't worry, we're coming. It might be next Friday after that announcement is made.
And all I'll say, because I'm sworn to secrecy, is we wouldn't push it back unless there was a reason to push it back.
And there are 2 indeed Colts who are up for that vote, which are of course Reggie Wayne and Syracuse's own Dwight Freeney. I got it in just before.
Man, I thought we were going to get through this podcast without that.
No, you can't do it. I even mentioned Zaire Franklin earlier in the podcast.
You want to mention another?
No, I don't need to. That goes without saying.
Mention one more name, would you please?
Carson Wentz.
There you go.
Okay, and now we can finally close out this Colts Blue Zone podcast. You can follow us.
And you feel better, don't you?
I feel a lot better. You can follow us on Twitter at Colts Blue Zone for news and notes throughout the week and tidbits that we'll certainly get into more discussion here when we're in front of the microphone. Mike Chappell is at mchappell51. You can read all his work online at fox59.com, cbs4indy.com. Matt Adams is at Statomatti. I'm at DaveG_sports. We appreciate you listening, and we'll see you next week on the Colts Blue Zone podcast.